Hi, this is Joe's Corner 76. I will be commenting on issues that affect the human condition. I want to hear from you. To change the human condition, we need to be engaged. Is medically assisted suicide right or wrong? It's something we should all think about. It's been in the news a lot, and with various points of view, from no way to do it to it's okay to do it. It's a subject that's very relevant today. Advances in medicine have allowed lives to be prolonged beyond what they used to be. People are able to live productive and happy lives because medicines manage and control conditions that were death sentences before. Advances in surgical and medical technology have given mankind extended lives that allow people to survive and thrive. But with all of these advances, we still have to acknowledge that certain conditions are not curable. The doctors are able to alleviate the pain of terminal illness, but in some cases, drugs no longer help. There are diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, AIDS, and sometimes MS that can't be cured. They have a progressive degeneration over time. This has led to the question of some terminal patients and those with progressive diseases to ask for the right to be able to commit medically assisted suicide and euthanasia. Some countries already offer this process, and others are in the midst of considering it. It's a difficult subject for society, for the sanctity of life, the rights of those suffering, and the dilemma that it poses for the medical profession. The pragmatic argument states some of the practices used in life care are euthanasia in all but name. A patient requests a do not resuscitate instruction. The patient's heart stops beating, and the doctor does nothing in view of the patient's wish. Here, a patient might be denied treatment that could save their lives. Critics argue this is a form of euthanasia. Another case is where a patient in palliative care is experiencing pain for which there is no treatment. They're put to sleep using medical sedation. It could be argued this is a form of euthanasia. If these practices are happening, it is argued that there should be legalized and regulated processes. Many doctors, nurses, and palliative care staff are not in agreement with medically assisted suicide. Assisted suicide and euthanasia is allowed in some countries, and now Canada is legalizing it. We should look at the pros and cons of this practice. What are some of the main arguments against assisted suicide and euthanasia? Religious. The most common argument is that human beings are created by God, and therefore all human life is sacred, and only God can choose when life ends. Committing an act of assisted suicide or euthanasia is acting against God's will and is therefore a sin. The slippery slope argument is based on the concept that once a healthcare system, and by extension the government, starts killing its own citizens, It has crossed a line that should never be crossed and is setting a dangerous precedent. When society allows voluntary euthanasia, will it change its attitudes to include non-voluntary and involuntary euthanasia? Legalized voluntary euthanasia can lead to certain consequences. Ill people who need constant care may feel they need to request euthanasia so they are not a burden to the family. Making euthanasia legal may discourage research into palliative care research and possible cures with terminal illnesses being found. The medical ethics argument says that euthanasia would violate the most important of medical ethics. A doctor must clearly bear in mind the obligation of preserving human life from conception. To ask doctors to skip their obligation to preserve life could damage the doctor-patient relationship. Causing death on a regular basis could become a routine administrative basis for doctors. This could lead to a lack of compassion when dealing with elderly, disabled, and terminally ill people. This could cause people with complex health issues or severe disabilities to distrust their doctors. They may think the doctor would rather kill them than cure them. The opposite argue is that advances in palliative care and mental health treatment means there is no reason why a person should feel they are suffering intolerably, whether it is physical or mental or both. Here it can be argued that if a person is given the right care in the right environment, there's no reason they can't have a painless and natural death. What are the points in favor of assisted suicide and euthanasia? Many people argue that a merciful God would not oppose something that would ease endless suffering for one of his creatures. No matter what we feel on a religious basis, we all agree that people have free will, and people of sound mind should be able to make decisions on their fate. This makes the main point in favor of allowing medically assisted suicide as one of individual rights. Proponents say a person of sound mind who is terminally ill should be able to avoid severe pain, loss of bodily functions, or loss of mind, and should be allowed to die in dignity in a place of their choosing. Society already allows a passive death, since people can refuse treatments to prolong life, such as refusing dialysis, ventilators, and feeding tubes. People can request a do not resuscitate provision. People can set up a living will. Some points that can be made against medically assisted suicide are: if patients who are disabled feel they were a financial burden to the families, they might request this. Severely disabled people who had a bad day might ask for assisted suicide when all they need is a hug and understanding. Providing this to people with psychiatric problems, this could be helped with further treatment. With medically assisted suicide as a legal practice, would life eventually become less valued? Should society next decide that any disabled, mentally challenged people or old people who are drains on the health system should be terminated? Who decides this? Will medical research not be as aggressive for terminal diseases or palliative care? This is a complex issue that society has to really think about. Medically assisted suicide is now practiced in a number of countries with various regulations that are significantly different. In Canada, as of June 2016, euthanasia, or as it's called in its voluntary form, medically assisted in dying, became legal along with assisted suicide to end suffering of terminally ill patients. In broad terms, here's the criteria. Must be 18 years old, have a grievous and irremediable medical condition subject to the rules regulating this. Must have informed consent, which means you give consent after all the options have been explained to you. Mental disabilities will be handled on an individual basis. All Canadians can request medical assistance in dying. How and where is determined by the province, territory, the rules governing medical organizations and medical institutions. This process requires safeguards that medically assisted suicide is done legally. These safeguards will require health care providers to carry out this service properly and in a way that protects people from abuse. Everyone who could be in this situation should discuss it with the appropriate medical practitioners. This issue is one that will most likely affect all of us in some way. It's a complex issue that we need to understand and comment to our lawmakers on. It affects how medicine evolves, the value of life, and how we could end up as a society. Let me know what you think. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Joe's Corner 76. You can hear me on Breaker, Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor FM, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, and YouTube at Joe's Corner 76.